Well, like I said earlier, as the quote goes, predicting rain does not count. Building arks does. So to answer this question of how the pandemic will change the future of the church in America, and maybe even our congregation more specifically, we're not just talking about a mental exercise. What we're actually doing is preparation. And so this morning, here's what I want to do. I want to give three things. I want to give a kind of a state of the church update. What's the congregation in E-Town looking like? And what's our online community, you all, wherever you are? What does that look like? Next, I want to make some bold predictions. And I've been watching a lot of sports talk radio, so I'm really getting the hang of this making bold predictions kind of thing. And third is I want to talk about what might be next for us, not only as E-Town congregation, but as our larger worshiping community and the church in the United States. So, first, we get this question a lot. How is the church doing these days? Well, the short answer is that the church is doing exactly what we hope it would do, and really what it should do in situations like this. We are adapting, we are innovating, and we are doing this in order to live out our mission of peace, service, and openness to all. That's what we're doing. And so programmatically, we hope you noticed Pastor Jason gave a really clear explanation that programmatically, we are offering all kinds of things, and that's not just for those of you who normally attend E-Town, it's for you no matter where you are. Adult Sunday school, Bible study, small groups, anti-racism reading circles. We have physically safe in-person and virtual youth activities. We have support groups. All of those things just keep trucking right along, and many of them have been initiated since the pandemic began. And then, though it's been challenging to do things like our biannual food drive, we've impacted the local food bank here in Elizabethtown tremendously. And I'm guessing you have as well, no matter where you're at, in the communities you're at. We've always encouraged you to support things locally, no matter where you live. Together, we were able to do this walk to Nigeria that Pastor Pam was just talking about, that we celebrated all those miles, all that money, in this virtual walk together. And we know that people from coast to coast were participating in that. All the while, we continue to attend to the needs of our spiritual community here in Elizabethtown and beyond. And for us here in E-Town, there have been some pretty heavy and traumatic days as well. We have been the church together. Programmatically, that's where we're at. Financially, people are saying, how's that looking? Well, financially, I would say it this way. We're okay. We're doing all right. Now, giving is down from where it was last year, kind of like you might expect during a pandemic. So we are a bit behind our budget, as usual. The good news is that thanks to prudent spending by our commissions and our board, our pastors and staff, we are in the black at the moment. As always, thank you for your giving. Every bit makes a difference in our ministries. Update on staff and leadership. Well, I would say it this way, since I get to work with them, they're awesome. But I think that you already know that. None of all of this that I've already mentioned could have happened without our excellent, our top-notch board and board leadership. I'm talking about the lay folks who help lead the congregation. And also, of course, our staff and our pastors who have worked tirelessly, faithfully, and I would say intelligently on behalf of the church and keeping Jesus' message moving on. Lastly, I want to say a word about our building project. For those of you who don't know, we at E-Town, before all this started, were on our way, building momentum towards a building project where we will add some significant space. We will renovate our building that is 60 plus years old. And understandably, this process has been slowed quite a bit. So one of the things that happened, though, was that our architect needed to work from home, so he couldn't work with his team, and we are in the design and development phase, which means he's literally putting pen to paper and getting some of these things together. So it's exciting. We look forward to what Tom's going to bring back to us. But The building project hasn't been at a total standstill. As it was reported in our newsletter, the E-Town Borough Zoning Board voted unanimously in favor of the church's application, which also included, and this is really cool, I think this will be news to many of you, part of that included an agreement with Elizabethtown College that is right adjacent to our property here. We share several boundaries together. E-Town College's Board of Trustees also agreed unanimously to sell us a piece of property about an acre big next to the church for the cost. Now, I don't want you to be blown away by the sticker shock here. For the cost of $1. This will allow us in our building project to maintain more of our existing green space, and it will also allow for reciprocity, greater reciprocity between the church and the college and the partnership that is there. It's a wonderful thing. We can share some of that infrastructure so that it's not redundant and is actually helpful. So, even though we're apart and we miss one another deeply, the congregation is doing just about as well as you can imagine it could in times like these. That's our congregation here. But what about this additional congregation? Those of you who are watching from all around the country. Well, I was trying to think about how I could communicate this to you, and one of the things I thought of was that often on Sunday afternoons after the service is done, my wife Karen and I will go for a run or a walk out on a local rail trail. And more than once, this has happened. We've been running along, huffing and puffing. I've got my hat on, I've got my sunglasses on. Well, I remember one time in particular when a family was coming towards us on bikes from the other direction. I'm running along with Karen, and then all of a sudden the mom in the front of the group jams on the brakes, and she says, "Hey, you're Pastor Greg." I had never met this woman before in my life. She had been watching, though, online. And like I said, believe it or not, that's actually happened more than once on the trail. There are tons of people on this trail. Also in the grocery store. I'm behind my mask and frozen foods aisle. "Hey, you're that guy, aren't you? Aren't you that guy?" Well, we put two and two together. Yeah, I was that guy. Our staff and our pastors are running into this all over the place. We're hearing of friends who are watching here in town, but also around the country. I'm getting letters from folks like Helen in Phoenix. We're getting texts from people like Bill and Mayo in San Diego. We are genuinely evolving into a congregation that is more than just physically planted here in Elizabethtown, Pennsylvania. We are becoming a worshiping community that is much larger. And that's where things really start to get interesting in my mind. I want to share a few statistics with you. It's a mouthful, so I need a little drink first. Most years, through spring and summer, we would average about 250 to 260 people a week in person, live worship here in the sanctuary. And I remember one time when Pastor Pam and I were up on what we call the elders bench here, and we hit 20 viewers on our live stream. And Pam and I were blown away. We were practically jumping up and down on the bench because that was kind of a new high. Well, 20 viewers live, and let's say we had about 250 here. What are we at now? Can you see, Pam, Eric? We're at 244 right now, and that's actually a little low during the pandemic. During the pandemic, we have averaged about for anywhere from 250 to 300, and I'll use the word screens instead of viewers or attendees or even worshipers, because we don't know actually how many people are represented by those screens. We know that some of you are sitting down watching with your families. It might be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people. So we know that when we see 250 screens, or 244 as the case may be today, we could probably easily say that we have twice that many who are here in this worshiping virtual community together. And we know that you're all across the country. It's amazing. Who would have thought? But here's the thing, it does not end there. It doesn't end there, because over the course of the next few hours, and you could even watch this from home if you wanted, over the course of the next few hours, the number of people who watch our service, because it's going to go from being live to being posted on YouTube, will skyrocket. It's going to start gaining by the hundreds. Our Sunday morning worship services during the pandemic are averaging 951 views. So again, we don't know what that math can be extrapolated to, but we know that it's a lot more than 950 people. Some Sundays have actually eclipsed 1,300 views. Who would have thought that COVID would have led us here? What is God doing with us right now? Now, I do want to take a little break here and say a special message to those of you who are joining us and are now part of our community, but maybe have never even stepped foot inside these doors. We are so glad that you found us. And even though we don't get to see one another, none of us get to do hugs and handshakes right now, but we want you to know that you are part of us, and that we feel like we are genuinely better when we are all together, even if it is virtually. We want you to, we want you to keep reaching out to us, keep writing us letters, keep posting messages in the live chat, keep sending us texts, keep saying hi on the trail. It's fantastic. And keep letting us know how we can serve you better. That's part of who we are. We practice peace, service, and openness to all. So, that's part number one, the state of our local congregation and the state of our congregation universal. Let's get to the predictions part, okay? Let's do this. All right. So if there's one thing that the pandemic has taught me, is that I'm not really very good at predicting the future, or especially how human beings are actually going to react. I think that I'm not the only one, though. I read one article when I was doing a little bit of research for this. I read one article that was posted way back in March when all this started, and it's really cute what it says. Now, it was asking authors and professors to float ideas about what life will look like during and post-pandemic. And again, it's really quaint, because listen to this. One person says, "We will come closer together as a society because we'll have a common enemy, COVID-19. Or that we will learn to communicate better with one another. Another one, we will live healthier digital lifestyles. And more exercise and smaller waistlines." Well, some of these have gone all right. How's the rest of that going for us as a country? Not seeing it. Well, since they weren't any good at predicting the future, and I'm not really any good at predicting the future, it got me to thinking about Scripture and some of the what seemed like bold predictions in Scripture. Now, I want to take a look at one for our Scripture today, that is Jesus, and you see this a lot in the Gospels. Jesus kind of doing this future forecasting about when he would come again and change the world as we know it. And they thought about it as sort of end-of-the-world moments. And I thought, here we are in maybe let's call it a minor end-of-the-world scenario, as oxymoronic as that sounds, that you could have a minor end-of-the-world scenario. But let's think about it that way. Because through the Gospels, Jesus definitely has these predictions over and over and over again. Let's go ahead and take a look at that, guys. This is from Matthew 24. This is just verses 3 to 8. Later, as he, Jesus, was sitting on Mount Olives, his disciples approached and asked him, "Tell us, when are these things going to happen? What will be the sign of your coming, that the time's up?" Jesus said, "Watch out for doomsday deceivers. Many leaders are going to show up with forged identities, claiming, 'I am Christ, the Messiah.' They will deceive a lot of people. When reports come in of wars and rumored wars, keep your head and don't panic. This is routine history. This is no sign of the end. Nation will fight nation and ruler fight ruler over and over. Famines and earthquakes will occur in various places. This is nothing compared to what is coming. This scripture, and many others, quite frankly, in the Gospels, paint the picture that Jesus was to return even before the disciples were going to die. Jesus is making it pretty plain. Well, obviously that didn't happen. As we've preached and taught here before, we did a whole series on apocalyptic and eschatological narrative and scripture. You can go back in the archives and look at that on YouTube. But as we've preached and taught before, there seem to be a number of options for what we can do with scriptures like this now, because it seems like they're incongruent. So one of the things we can do is we think, maybe the writers of Scripture got it wrong. Or maybe Jesus was misunderstood or misquoted. How about maybe all that end of the world talk was really more metaphorical than literal? Last one I'm going to share for just for today is maybe it was intended to mean Jesus' ascent to the heavenly throne. I think that one's a real stretch personally. And to be totally honest, none of these explanations really scratch the itch for me. But here's what does. Looking back through Scripture and reminding ourselves what prophetic language actually is. Now, I'm talking about going all the way back to the Hebrew Bible, all the way back to the Old Testament. Biblical prophecy is not and never were crystal ball predictions about a future that is out of our hands. Pretty much the opposite. Prophecy is a call to action from the people, or for the people from the prophet. Often it's a reprimand to change our ways, personally, but even more likely from these prophets, societally. It's a reminder to be God's people again. Prophets are not heavenly meteorologists with a 5-month or 5-year forecast. Prophetic predictions, if they are predictions, come this way. They come with if-then statements. If you keep ignoring God's ways, if we keep doing it like this, well, then that bad stuff's going to happen. If you touch a hot stove, you're going to get burnt. It's as simple as that. I like the way biblical scholar Peter Enns puts it. He says that prophets want to activate certain behaviors in their audiences, not prognosticate future events. I'll say that again. Prophets want to activate certain behaviors in their audiences, not prognosticate future events. Prophets want us to get it right. They want us to turn things around. They want us to right the ship. Prophecy does not simply seek to predict the future, but to change the present. How are you thinking about it now? So, looking at some of Jesus' words, like the ones we saw just a few minutes ago, the call to action, thank you, Pastor Eric, the call to action is usually about being ready. It's about being adaptive. It's about being faithful. Predicting rain doesn't count. Building arks does. So, I just said that I'm not going to make some predictions, but here we go. Nevertheless, here are some predictions, but they're more like if-then statements. Check this out. Many national church organizations have released surveys and studies they've done in recent weeks and months, and I'll tell you what, it does not look good for Christianity. Not that it looked all that great for Christianity before here in the U.S. According to the congregational consultants at Converge Heartland, quote, urban churches are experiencing a 15 to 25% decline in giving, and rural churches are experiencing a 25 to 35% decline in giving. Another study from Presbyterian Church USA recently released said that church attendance in congregations with fewer than 100 people is decreasing, while attendance in larger churches is increasing. This is changing the religious landscape. And though we don't have any specific numbers for the Church of the Brethren, it also doesn't look good. A huge majority of Brethren congregations are rural and under 100 people. Now, even prior to COVID, the denomination was already bleeding about 1% to 2% of our membership annually. In fairness, that's like most of mainline Protestantism in the U.S. So, many of our sibling churches that were already on pace to close in the coming years, well, that problem is being compounded. And making things even worse, the kind of straight talk that I'm sharing with you right now is seen as overly critical or overly negative in our denomination and is squashed. People simply don't want to talk about it. It's frowned upon, to put it in the nicest of terms. Now, to return to the original question of how the pandemic will change the church in America, it looks like COVID is going to accelerate the closure of many congregations. What do we do with that? To put it into stark if-then prophetic language, I would say it this way. Church, if we don't meet the needs of the world around us, then we will face ruin. It's pretty simple. And again, Prophet Eric, like Pastor Eric, thank you for being a prophet too, brother. Like Pastor Eric said a few weeks ago, sharing prophetic news can sometimes feel like the worst job ever. So, I've predicted some rain. What are we going to do about building arks? We have no idea when we're going to get back to normal, but we do know that things will never be the same. When we do come back, those of us who meet in person are going to act kind of funny, I think, when we're back together in the building. It's going to be awkward at first. Do I shake do I give a hug? I don't know what to do. And I know that some of you couch surfers are going to stay at home for a while so that you can eat pancakes and drink your coffee while you participate this morning. Wait, I think you dribbled a little there on your PJs. You might want to get that before it sets in. For those of us who will be here, we know that those hugs and handshakes are going to be different. And we do trust that over time that will pass and things will be back to quote-unquote normal. But something will be fundamentally different about who we are. Not just living through the pandemic together while apart, but we know that we're going to be a different congregation. Now, here's what I mean by that. I give this little spiel every time we welcome new members into the life of this congregation. I say that when we welcome new members, they're no longer going to be called new, they're going to be called members, but also that they have just changed us forever, and that could not be better news. Because every time we bring new people in, it literally changes who we are. New gifts, new abilities, new insights, new love. That's just the way it should be. So, as we see evidence that many of our online viewers are locals who have used this as an opportunity to take us for a nice long test drive, thank you. I hope that someday we will meet face to face. I hope that when we're back in-person live worship, that you will join us. I don't know, I think we're even better in person. But what of us as an online community? What ark can we build together there? Well, here's what we know. We know that we have some number in the hundreds, if not thousands, of people who are part of this worshiping community. We know that some of you are buying time until your congregation is back open in worship, and when it does, you're going to go back to that congregation. That is wonderful. We are so glad that you've joined us. We know that Lidditz will go back to worship, and we will miss you, Lidditz. We'll miss you, Pastor Eric. We've been glad to have you here as long as you've been able to join us. Now, we also know that there is some probably very small percentage of our views that actually come from, I don't know what to call this group other than I'm going to put it in modern day language. I'm going to say theological haters who want to know what crazy E-Town is up to this time in the sermon. And that's fine too. We want to be 100% transparent. We welcome everybody. It's part of being open to all. However, we also know, because you've told us, that many of you are going to stick around from coast to coast, north to south. You're going to stick around because you can't find the blend of preaching and teaching and music in the community in which you live. And since attending in person will never be an option, you will continue to join us online. Again, wonderful. We're so glad that you have joined us. Now, as we bring this plane down in for a landing, I got dared to tackle this topic. Now, it's only fair if I can dare you back, right? Here's what I dare you to do. I dare you, and I'm looking at the establishment Elizabethtown Church of the Brethren members and congregants here. I dare you to shift how you view our congregation. In many ways, we are no longer Elizabethtown Church of the Brethren, because most of those who join in our virtual worship are not in Elizabethtown. I dare us to think about what our responsibility is to our online sisters and brothers, even when all of this is over. Even if we have, let's just say, 100 screens, which is still a lot of people. That's a lot of people. What will our responsibility be to that part of our congregation? We might have to explore some totally new ways of thinking about being and doing church. Here's one idea. I had somebody reach out to me and ask if we would consider starting an affiliate congregation in their hometown in the Midwest. We've never done it like that before. We've got partner congregations at University Park in Maryland, the D.C. area, and in Cincinnati, Ohio. This is an entirely new way of thinking about being together. What would we do with that? I dare us, E-Town, to double down on hospitality. That's hospitality for those who join us for the first time here in the building, when we reopen eventually, and hospitality to our online congregation. And now, online congregation, I dare you to tell us why you're here. I dare you to tell us how we can serve you and help bring you more fully into community together. Even if you don't live in E-Town, even if you don't live in Lancaster County, even if you don't know how to say Lancaster County, you say it like a reasonable person, Lancaster. That's how I said it before I came. But hey, they took me in, they'll take you in too. We'll take you just like you are. I also dare you, online community, to engage. You know, one of my biggest regrets during our pandemic programming that I talked about a little earlier in the sermon is that more people have not taken advantage of it. We have fantastic teachers for our Bible studies, for our Sunday schools, and they're coming from all over the country, all over the world. This is not just for quote-unquote E-Town people only. What you can do is you can rewind this, not now, of course. You can rewind it, go back to the beginning, and you could see the announcements that run in slides before the worship starts. You can also go to our website, etowncob.org. Pretty simple. It's all there. Check it out. Christianity has been through moments far more troubling than this. We know that. What we also know is that oftentimes these moments change us for the better. Phyllis Tickle, one of the great theologians and spiritual minds of a generation, and one of the best names, you got to admit. Phyllis Tickle wrote a book in 2008 called The Great Emergence. The idea at the heart of this book was the historical observation that every 500 years, the historical, institutional Christian church meets the needs of a changing world by totally revamping how church is done. It reinvents itself. It has a grand reopening of sorts. Think about it, just real quick. You had Pentecost that started the Christian church. Then about 500 years after that, the best pope, Gregory the Great, brought the church out of the Dark Ages. Then 500 years after that, we had the Great Schism. And then about 500 years after that, in 1517, Martin Luther triggered the Protestant Reformation. In each of these cases, three things happened. A new and more dynamic, more relevant form of Christianity emerged. The church organization changed significantly. The institution throws off the stuff that's no longer working, that's restricting its growth. And number three, tremendous growth. Wait a minute. 1517. Gee, if my math is right, we're 3 years overdue. Are we ready to build the ark? Are we ready to be the next emergent church that shares who Jesus was and is for all time? And if we saw that coming, would we welcome it? I dare you, I dare us to do more than just predict rain. Let's build an ark.